The following program contains content that some listeners may find disturbing and may not be suitable for younger audiences, including graphic and in-depth discussions on sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Outlier Project. I'm Molly Corbett.
And I'm Chris Philippa.
And we are Team Outlier. Outlier is the docu-series that tells the timely stories of sexual assault survivors' redemptive resolutions. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing well, and you?
Me too. We woke up kind of ready to go, didn't we?
Sure did.
Our feet hit the floor and the devil was scared. Is that what you said this morning?
What I said.
I love it. So first thing we want to do is just remind everybody we are in the Indiegogo campaign of our lives, right? We have an ambitious goal, and our goal is $75,000. And we want to make sure that we are pointing everyone to that link, which we've made a little bit easier for you. So there's not a lot of gobbledygook. It's simply tinyurl.com/Indiegogo. That's tinyurl.com/Indiegogo. And that's for the Outlier Project's Indiegogo goal of $75,000. And we are very excited to have 7 backers so far. We've got 2 months left to go in our campaign, and we can't do this without you. And what we are doing is ending the pandemic of sexual assault. Chris, you have something to tell me this morning. You saw something in the news.
I did. It got me fired up this morning. And as we know, there is so much going on in the news with the hashtag #MeToo, all of the allegations against so many people. And I saw this first thing. NYPD opens investigation into Russell Simmons as more sexual assault allegations surface. And this is the Los Angeles Times. Following at least 11 accusations of sexual misconduct against Russell Simmons, 7 of which allegedly happened in New York City.
Wow.
The New York Police Department's Special Victims Unit has opened an investigation into the embattled music mogul. And apparently he is an entrepreneur, hip-hop guy, has a clothing line. He's worth $300-something million.
Oh, yeah. And we should say we know who he is, and we know who his company is and his clothing line, but we're not saying it because we don't want to drive business to this guy.
Exactly. And so it's not even surprising to see these allegations anymore in the news, which I love.
Yes.
However, here was his response. He has started his own hashtag, not me. Hashtag not me. But then I love what he says. I think this was an Instagram post yesterday. And I quote, "Today I begin to properly defend myself. I will prove without any doubt that I am innocent of all rape charges. Today I will focus on the original sin, Carrie Clausen, the claim that created this insane pile on of my hashtag me too. Stay tuned. We'll share information today. And tomorrow, the case of Jenny Lumet. My intention is not to diminish the hashtag MeToo movement in any way, but instead hold my accusers accountable. Hashtag not me. Again, this is not a movement against or even in conjunction with hashtag MeToo. It's just a statement about my innocence."
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Simmons, but that's exactly what it is. It is a statement against hashtag #MeToo. And I wish you the very best of luck in challenging those allegations. I have said before, Chris, and I know you know this about me, I will always err on the side of the victim. Too long, far too long, have victims sat in the shadows. It's a great quote from The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. We are shedding light on the allegations of victims. And for so long, for decades, hundreds and thousands of years, victims have not been believed. And good luck to him.
Well, I mean, obviously, he did this with intent.
Oh, yeah. He knows exactly what he's doing.
And then he wants to say, oh, but this in no way diminishes other victims. Of course it does. Don't use that hashtag.
That's a load of crap, and he knows it.
Right.
Yeah. So, so we've got what we have here is a counter movement on our hands. He may not think that's its intention, but it doesn't matter what he thinks. We know the truth. And so we want to issue a call to action. We'd like to do that at the end of our podcast, but we're going to do it right now. If you are out there and you feel comfortable sharing your status as a victim of sexual assault, we want you to use #MeToo. Light it up, man. Light Twitter up with our movement, and let the chips fall where they may. Good luck to Mr. Simmons.
I agree, and I think that this brings up a good point. You know, it seems like in our country we have major swings.
Yeah.
And
we're polarizing, aren't we?
We are. And I think we're going to see a swing back like what Mr. Simmons is doing, and then probably meet back in the middle. However, that being said, I do believe we need to differentiate Outlier and differentiate between sexual harassment and sexual assault. They are two different animals.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Go ahead, keep going. You're on a roll.
Not to diminish sexual assault,
certainly not.
Or sexual harassment.
Certainly not
in the workplace or any other place. It is not okay, and it is very, very damaging. However, I feel like with sexual assault, that is a different level, and we need to acknowledge that. But we also need to acknowledge that when accusations come up with the Me Too movement, we do have to have due process. And unfortunately, that usually means more than one story coming forward.
Yeah.
And in the case of Mr. Simmons, at least 11 accusations.
11? It's 11 accusations.
As of yesterday.
Yeah. Good luck, Mr. Simmons. Good luck to you. Yeah, we recognize that assault often has become the product of escalating harassments, right? So the distinction that we're making here is not this is something we are trying to end and this is something we're not trying to end. No, we are simply saying that harassment is not assault.
Correct.
And assault can have happened with an escalation of harassments, but one is not the other.
And I also feel like, and we have heard from survivors of sexual assault, that they're somewhat offended by the #MeToo movement in a lot of ways because it is being lumped together.
Right. And God, we live in a world where somebody's going to get offended. And I say all the time, when you talk as much as I do, you're bound to offend somebody at some point. But I know how to apologize. And I think that's the key there. So to those who are, as a victim, I feel like I can say, because I am a victim of sexual assault, I can say to my other fellow victims and survivors, don't be offended. Listen, they are suffering a similar pain, but not the same pain. Let's identify terms. Let's know our vocabulary. Let's not call something it isn't. But let's also recognize that there are varying degrees of pain, and you just never know where somebody is. There's a quote that I used to see on a lot of people's emails, like the signature back when we used to put quotes at the bottom of our email. I think we need to bring that back. I liked that. And the quote was something like, be kind, for everyone is suffering some battle. And that's what I think about the difference between harassment and assault. Harassment may not be on the legal level of assault. It may not do the deep damage and have the deep impact that assault has. But it is an offense to the victim, and it needs to be recognized as such. But we are, as Outliers, we are making a distinction between harassment and assault so that everyone's clear on what the Outlier Project is about. Do we want to end harassment? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm talking about the little girl whose panties are down around her ankles and her uncle's touching her inappropriately. That's the kind of thing. I mean, I definitely want sexual harassment to end. Don't get me wrong. But I want people to stop using other people's body for their sexual entitlement.
Period.
Yeah. End of story. Well, I think we hammered that out.
I think so. I got kind of fired up this morning.
Chris, I keep hearing a term, due process. What is this? Tell me. I know you look, we haven't even talked about who we are in this podcast, but you come from a very specific background.
I do. I am a retired sexual assault nurse examiner.
Right. Okay. So you know all about due process. You've been a part of due process. Let me hear about that. Educate me on that.
So, due process is actually when it goes through the legal system.
Okay.
And the reason that we're even talking about this today is because I had this discussion with my husband.
Oh, yeah. I remember it was somewhat heated, wasn't it?
A little.
A little.
But
That never happens in marriage, ever.
however, after I calmed down, there was a lot of validity to that. And the way our country is set up is with due process. We can't just accuse people and crucify them in the media and that be that.
And we realize how uncomfortable that feels to hear that spoken. But it's the truth. In this country, constitutionally, you are innocent until proven guilty. How does that square with what we say about always erring on the side of the victims? What do we want? We want the victim to be heard. We want the victim to be believed insofar as we start an investigation, right? Otherwise, if you accuse someone of stealing something from you, and the person is just innocent because we haven't started a process of proving that they're guilty, well then, this is how justice works. And it's part of why I don't really value legal justice as much as I do restorative justice.
Exactly.
It's very hard to deliver in legal justice what restorative justice can deliver.
And in the case of sexual assault, the legal process does the best they can. However, it's very difficult. Mm-hmm. So in the case like you were talking about with a robbery, that's tangible.
Yeah.
Something was stolen, a tangible item, we recover it.
And you might even find it in the perpetrator's house.
Correct.
Proof that it's where it's not supposed to be.
Exactly.
Right.
And in the case of sexual assault, it often becomes a he said, she said, he said crime.
75 she said.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Because somebody has to be there almost to witness it, to really corroborate it, right?
That's what I hate about this.
And especially with pediatric sexual assault.
God.
Very, very difficult.
And then you have a victim who can't even fully articulate what's happened to them.
Exactly.
But you know in your experience that kids with forensic interviews specifically aimed at children in children's advocacy centers, those interviewers have incredible tools for getting to the root of the matter with children and what's happened to them. They use all kinds of different tools that they don't use for adults, like crayons and drawing and dolls, and they're able to sort of wean out terrible stories from children without creating narrative. I think that's the big concern with children.
Absolutely, and they're highly specialized and educated to do so, and it holds up in court because they are so well trained and do such a great job with this.
And thank God for it.
Exactly. So getting back to the due process, we have to look at the investigative side of it. And the legal justice system, let's be honest, it fails many, many, many survivors. It's a very difficult case to take forward, and then it's very traumatic. It's very traumatizing to relive all of this.
Because the victim is forced to come out into the light and be recognized for who they are. Victimized.
Again.
Yeah, over and over again.
Over and over again in the system. And we're getting better at that.
Yeah, I think we are.
But we're not there.
And we're getting better by varying degrees from state to state. Some states are better at this than others. Some locales are better at this than others. We talk all the time about how proud we are of Louisiana for its laws on the books regarding sexual assault victims, and we've got some real advocacy in our legislation in this state, and I credit that to folks like Morell and Moreno. They've been working hard to make sure that victims have a safe path for disclosure, and it's really important. And you know, I speak in hyperbole. That's who I am. Everything is dialed up a notch. I can't imagine, where my son gets that from. But anyway, I do speak in hyperbole. So of course, do we not put any faith in the legal system? No, that's certainly not the case. I mean, I want everyone to get legal justice if they can, but I've said before, legal justice means one of two things: either someone's going to jail or someone's getting a check. And I just, when knowing what sexual assault feels like as a victim, somebody sitting in prison might take a little of the edge off, but that, or somebody handing me money ain't going to do it for me.
I don't think it will do it for most people.
Right.
I think that's why we really have to push the restorative justice. And what we mean by that is healing within.
You're so good. I knew you would define it.
Healing within and taking what happened and being able to live your life in a productive manner without it coloring everything that happens to you going forth.
And for those of you listening who are victims of sexual assault, you know that assault has colored every single aspect of your life. I mean, I'll go ahead and say it. It affects the possibility of me having a vibrant sex life with my husband. I mean, sex was stolen from me at the age of 5 before I even knew what it was. So I can't have an intimate moment with my husband without thinking about that 16-year-old touching me and using me as a tool of friction against his body. I can't do that. And it takes a lot of counseling to get me to a place where I remember, or it's not about remembering because I never knew it, knowing intuitively that sex is for me, it belongs to me, and it's for my pleasure. And I believe, as a person of faith, it's God intended. And sexual assault shouldn't be able to take that away from me. But it's a hard place to get to, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm 44 years old, and I still struggle with it. So it is touching every aspect of our lives, and not just the sexual, our confidence at work, the feeling of not being safe in a parking lot. These are fears that women have all the time and have to live with that and manage it. And we manage it so much so that I don't even think we think about the fact that we're managing it. It's just second nature to us. And then you take into account that you've got to have these interpersonal relationships with people. And, for me, it even boils down, if I'm not in a relationship with someone, if I'm getting onto an elevator with a man, I'm suspicious. I grew up, my dad wore a T-shirt growing up. My dad was in law enforcement. And it had a huge police shield on it. And the top of it said, "In God we trust." And the bottom of it said, "All others we investigate." That is the motto by which I live. I believe everyone is suspicious and up to something. And, even as a survivor, when I have company that stays the night, even family, I often lock my son's door. It's my job to protect him, and I take it very seriously. But I do want to say one thing. I've been talking a lot about women in this little tirade that I've just gone off on. But I want to note that the Outlier Project recognizes that there are thousands and thousands of men who are also victims, and many, many more than have ever reported. Because as hard as it is for a woman to report what's happened to them, for men, I believe it is exponentially harder because of our cultural ideas about what it means to be male and what it means to be female. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, absolutely. And we know that to be true.
Yeah.
I feel like the Me Too movement, I've seen the hashtag Me Too.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
And
Yep.
I am so delighted to see that. And we're seeing men come forward in record numbers now.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's put that call out with our earlier call. We want to light up Twitter with hashtag Me Too. Let's light it up with hashtag Me Too, hashtag Men Too. Let's do that for our brothers who are also victims of sexual assault and let them know that Outlier is aware of them, we support them, and we stand with them in recovery.
One of the things in our mission is to foster justice. What we mean by that is restorative justice.
Yep, absolutely.
So how does somebody get to restorative justice?
We've seen it happen, haven't we?
We have.
Before our very eyes. In fact, one outlier in particular that I'm thinking of, it happened in her almost overnight. I mean, I watched her get to a place of fierce confidence and passion for other survivors. Just in the beginning of Outlier, when all we were was a little art exhibit in Shreveport, Louisiana. She came to be a part of it and volunteer. She was one of the outliers on the wall. She was pregnant at the time that she was photographed for the exhibit, but then she's got her baby by the time it's time to put the exhibit on the wall, and she's there with the baby, helping me put art up on the wall and bring light to this dark subject. And it was just amazing to watch this extraordinary transformation in her. I don't even know if we can describe what's going on there. It's almost like a spiritual thing.
I believe it is. And that's what we saw in that art exhibit.
Yes.
And so many disclosures, because we know this, when people feel safe and there's safety in numbers, more and more people will come forward. And we did have counselors there on hand to help us handle this.
Absolutely.
So one of our main objectives with Outlier is to be an advocacy connector. And what we mean by that is we are going to connect people who reach out to us with the appropriate resources for them to reach restorative justice.
We've been doing it. We've been at this work already. In fact, we've had to put a system in place to handle the load because we're getting so many people needing to be connected with services. And I'm grateful for that. And you said more and more outliers are feeling safe to tell their story. And that is the cultural paradigm shift I see happening in our culture. Chris, I swear, I never would have thought that we'd be living in a time when an allegation would be made and it would affect elections.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, you're even speechless now. It's crazy. And of course, we're speaking of the recent Alabama election. It's just, we want to be clear. Outlier is nonpartisan. We're not trying to influence, we're trying to influence everyone, not just Democrats, not just Republicans. The pandemic that is sexual assault crosses all boundaries: social, economic, racial, religious, gender. There's no one who is not affected. There's no people group that has not been affected by the blight of sexual assault. So, but we can't shy away from the realities that election in Alabama was deeply affected by the allegations against Roy Moore and multiple allegations against him.
And it was still a close race.
Sure was. It sure was. I tell you, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And, am I sorry that we're hearing about more allegations? No, I'm not sorry, because I know that those things are happening. I know that the numbers reflect hundreds of thousands of victims every year. 4.5 times the population of New York City. That's the current number. That was current a year ago, of the number of people in the United States of America who are walking around with this story. That's just our nation. Can you imagine what it is in the 2/3 world where resources are so far fewer? I mean, it's unreal. It truly is a pandemic, and we say pandemic on purpose. It's not an epidemic. It's not regionally localized. It's everywhere. And we want this message to get everywhere. Every voice heard, every victim having a voice. That's the goal of Outlier. So we know that our subject is heavy. We're aware that it's hard for people to hear. And one of the components of what we do in the Outlier Project is to hold Me Too readings, where we had 40 readers read anonymous stories. Some were identified, but most of the victims wanted to remain anonymous. And we sat there for 2 hours and listened to those stories, and the spirit in the room was very heavy, because it's a deep burden that we carry. And now I feel like the burden is more shared and evenly distributed because we're all carrying it by hearing these stories, validating the words of victims, and at least giving space for due process so that if these people are guilty of the crimes of which they're accused, they can be brought to justice. That's what we want. Nothing more, nothing less. So I think we're on the right track, and I feel like the rest of the nation agrees with us. So we're in a good place with Outlier. So, Chris, we're going to close out our show with one of your most favorite quotes. It's on our Outlier webpage at outlierstories.com. Who says this quote?
Margaret Mead.
Okay, go ahead and read it for us.
This is my favorite. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Amen. And that's what we're doing. We may be small, but we're mighty. So we want you to come find us. We are all over the place, y'all. You can find Outlier at outlierstories.com. We are on Facebook /Outlier Stories, and you can find us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle at @outlier_stories. We want to hear from you. We'd love to have you as a volunteer if you are in the local Northwest Louisiana region. We'd love to have you like our pages and share them and follow them. And we'd also love to hear from you. You can email us anytime at hello@outlierstories.com. And please also take a moment to share our social media with your friends, family, and networks. I guarantee you know somebody who has this story in their past, and you may not even know it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time at the Outlier Podcast.